G'day guys, Will here. So today we're going to be continuing on with our build of the ultimate sim racing and gaming PC. So as you can see in front of me here, we're pretty much the same position as we were last video where we had the radiators installed. I've now flushed the radiators and kind of just mounted them back how they were in the previous video. But where we have progressed since the other day was, you would have remembered I was a little bit kind of stuck on how I was going to mount the pump and how I was going to mount the reservoir. There were a couple of different options that I was looking at. Now the brackets that I was speaking about have arrived from PC Case Gear over the last couple of days, and I spent quite a bit of time last night fiddling around coming up with the best possible solution for that. So I'm going to be showing you exactly what I've come up with there, getting that all installed, getting the fans installed on the radiators as well, getting some of the wiring started to run. So stick around, this one's going to be an interesting one. Oh, and I forgot to mention I also have this awesome new workbench now. Check this out, ready? Oh yeah. Okay, so we'll start off by having a quick look at the pump assembly here and exactly what I've done in a little bit more detail. So we've got a 90-degree elbow here, we've got a Y-splitter, a 45-degree elbow, a HD fitting for our hard tubes as well, and another 90-degree angle fitting here as well. Now there's going to be a drain port come off this. I'm still waiting for my male-to-male adapter to arrive for that. And then you can see here I've got a couple of little angle brackets on the back of the pump here as well. And those are from EK as well. They're called the EK Uni Holder 5070. And I've also used that to mount the reservoir, which you'll see in a moment as well. So what I'm actually thinking is, rather than screwing this into the bottom of the case, I'm going to use some really strong adhesive double-sided tape and a strip on either side, which is basically like glue. Once you stick it down, it's basically going to tear the paint off before it comes loose. And that should hopefully add a little bit of dampening as well, so we don't get any nasty vibrations from the pump coming through the case. That was one thing that I noticed in my previous build, is when the pump runs up, when the pump is bolted directly to the case, even with the medium shim in there, which you can see, the medium mount, it still can be a little bit noisy. So basically that's going to sit inside the case down here like this. We'll just quickly move that wiring out of the way so you can see. So it's going to go in down here. We'll sit like that. We'll have the pipe coming out from here, and then we'll also have the drain port just kind of poking out the side underneath the framework that sits there. So that should sit really nicely. But we'll get that done after we've done the fans and sorted out the radiators, I think. Now, just quickly show you the bracket that we've put together for the reservoir as well. So again, this is made entirely of EK parts. We've got our uni pump bracket for a 120mm fan, which is this back part that you can see here. And then we've got another set of the Uni Holder 5070s here, as well as the reservoir mounts that come with the reservoir itself. So now you can order these as a separate part if you need additional ones, but the reservoir does come with two enclosed in the packet. So that is basically just going to mount on the back of the fan assembly here, and then the reservoir simply clicks in as well. So the reservoir clicks in like that. We then tighten the two little screws on the side here. That clamps down so it can't move anywhere. And then a whole assembly screws on to the back of the radiator as if it were a fan. So it should look really good when it's all done, and everything's nice and black. Everything's a genuine part, so there's no horrible hardware store bracketry or anything like that. So anyway, we'll get that done probably last. I think we'll get the fans mounted on the front and the top radiator first, and then we'll set to work getting all of this stuff mounted, and then we can move on to the motherboard. So just quickly, in the previous video I mentioned about the longer screws that come with the Antec torque case, and you can see an example here holding the two screws next to each other. That is the EK fan screw, and that is the fan screw that comes with the Antec case. So what will happen is, where you're mounting a fan directly onto a radiator, you want to use the ones that are supplied with your radiator, which is the shorter one. Where we're mounting on the front of the case, we want to use the longer one. Now it's really, really important that you get this right, because if you try to install the longer screws on your top radiator, where the screws are going through the fan directly into the radiator, they are long enough to actually punch through the fins and potentially the core of the radiator. So just note that, make sure you use the shorter screws for the top fan, and then you want to use the longer screws that come with the Antec torque case to go through the front. Now I'll show you exactly what I mean when we're mounting the front fans, but you can see the thicker aluminium here means you just need a little bit of extra length on those screws. So make sure you're using the right ones, and let's get these top fans installed. So we're going to be installing these in a push configuration, so the fan's going to be blowing up through the top of the radiator. We want to create a bit of airflow. Even though it's an open air case, we're going to have pushing through the front and then sucking out the top basically, so we've got a constant airflow through the case. So we also want to make sure that our cables are all oriented correctly, facing towards the back as well, so we don't end up with any ugly cables elsewhere. And we try to bundle them up as much as possible. So we've got the ones on this side coming out from here, so we'll match these ones on this side here, and then the last one we can run up here as well. So we just want to screw that in place, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Now you might be wondering why I'm installing these after I've already installed the radiators in the case. It would have been a lot easier to do it outside the case. Basically, because I was playing around with spacing and things like that after I'd flushed the radiators, it just ended up sort of being that way. And this top radiator is actually really hard to install on your own because you have to kind of support it in place without bending any of the fins. You would have seen in the previous video where I kind of had my arm resting underneath it to do that. So I decided it was easier to sort of just spend the time and put these fans in tediously rather than risk bending any fins trying to take the fans back in and out. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll cable tie this towards the end, keep all those cables nice and tidy, and then we can just run them down the channel on the back here and into our fan controller, which arrived yesterday as well. So let's move on to the front fans now. Okay, so you can clearly see now the thicker aluminium on the front here, which is the reason why we need that additional clearance for the fan. So we are going to need to undo those two screws, but we'll mount the bottom ones in first so that everything's in position, and then we'll take these two screws out last so we don't have to worry about the radiator slipping. So we'll start at the bottom, work our way up, and when we get to the top we can take those screws out and replace them with the longer ones. So again, we just want to be sensible about how we place our cables. We want to run everything sort of roughly in the same position. So this one will go here, the next one will come out from here, and then the top one will probably feed through the top or something like that. So set it in place there, get our screw ready, and again you can see we're pushing air that way. So the side of the fan that has the supports is always the direction of airflow, so we want to mount it this way for the air to push through that way. Now another thing just to be aware of is usually it's easiest if you don't tighten the screws all the way down to begin with, just to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. Sometimes it can be a bit tricky to get all 4 screws in without cross threading. So I find if you make the screws a little bit loose to begin with, it makes things a lot easier later on. Okay, so once they're all installed, just check that they all spin freely. There's no scuffing or rubbing on the sides. Sometimes if you bolt the screws down a little bit too tight, they can actually deform the shell and you'll get a little bit of scraping. So just check that they're all spinning freely, but that all looks fine. And then we'll just need to tidy up our cabling a little bit later on.
The city catches fire. Smoke is getting higher.
Okay, so next up we want to install our mounting bracket for our reservoir. So it's going to sit on the back of the radiator in the second position for a 120mm fan. So it can be a little bit fiddly to get these screws in. You want to be really careful you don't accidentally drop them down inside the radiator. So it might be a little bit fidgety here. You also want to be really careful that you don't accidentally push your finger through any of the radiator fins as well. So get it in place, just start to tighten one of them. There we go. And once you've got one in place, it kind of frees up your other hand to get the other ones done. So just make sure it's in position. Now again, we don't want to tighten it up too much because we do want to be able to move things around afterwards. So get one done. Okay, so the next logical thing now to install is the pump, which is going to sit down here as we saw before. But before we do that, we want to make absolutely sure that we're still going to have enough room for all of our power supply cables, which need to run out of the back of the PSU down here as well. So what we're going to do first is install our cable mod sleeve cables, make sure that they're all going to fit, and then make sure we've got enough clearance for the pump before we set that into place as well. So this is one of my favorite parts of any build. I don't really know why. I think I'm a sucker for this kind of thing. So let's have a look here at what we've got inside the box. Cable Mod do such a nice job of their cables. They're absolutely beautiful. Set the box aside over here. Okay, so I'm probably going to make an absolute goose of myself trying to undo the knots here. No, not too bad. We're having a good day today. So we've got a whole bunch of sleeved cables here. Now we're not going to need every single one of them because we're not installing a whole lot of accessories and peripherals and things like that. So we'll organize the cables that we need, get them all plugged in, get them running through the back here, make sure there's still enough room for the pump, and then we can get the pump mounted. So laid out in front of us here, we have a SATA power cable for our various accessories. I'm not exactly sure how many we're going to have just yet. So we've got a header there that has 4 outputs, so we've got enough to go around. Might end up changing that to a double or something later on, but we'll see how we go. We've got a Molex power connector here as well for our lighting in the front of the case, the illuminated logo. We've got a couple of the external powers for our graphics cards. We've got a couple of external powers for our motherboard as well, the EATX. Now we use an 8-pin in one slot and 4-pin on the other slot, so these actually separate out like that, split in 2. Nice and easy. And then we've got our main ATX connector as well. So what we want to do now is get all of this plugged into the power supply, make sure we've got enough room, and then we'll get our pump installed. So good news, we've got heaps of room there for all of our cables. They sort of brush up against the pump, but that's not really a problem. I don't think we're going to have any issues with vibration, and it's not putting any strain on any of the cables whatsoever. It's all sitting in there very, very nicely. Okay, so time to install some fittings on our remaining little areas that we need. So we want to be really careful we don't damage the little O-rings when we're doing this. So we just want to do it finger tight. Make sure we don't cross thread it. And then pop the little cap on, O-ring goes in. Now we don't want to screw these down tight at this point because we don't want to squish and damage the O-ring. So just really, really loose. Alright, so we'll do a quick refit of the side panels here just so that we can make sure that everything's going to clear perfectly fine. I don't see any problems, it all fit perfectly before, but we always want to just double check before we go past the point of no return. Okay guys, so things are coming along pretty nicely now. I'm really happy with how this is looking, and yeah, we haven't run into too many snags thus far. I mean, behind the scenes it took me a good 3 or 4 hours of sort of trying different things and trying different layouts and things like that to come up with an idea that would actually work. But I think we're onto a winner here. I don't foresee there being any issues. It's going to be a little bit tricky getting some of that piping into place, but I think we've got enough movable parts and things like that that we shouldn't have too many problems. So next step now is to get the motherboard populated with the CPU, water block, RAM, SSD, and all those sorts of things. get it installed here, and then we can start plugging things in. So guys, stick around. I think I'll leave it at that for this video, but if you are interested in purchasing any of the gear that you see in these videos, you can do so using the affiliate links in the description below. Don't have partnerships with any of the brands in particular, but those are Amazon affiliate links. So a small percentage of the profits for any sales go towards helping out the channel and making things like this build possible. So thank you guys very much for your support as always. Make sure you hit the like button if you've enjoyed the video and found it useful. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell as well so you don't miss the next one. And I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.